Hi, and welcome to True Crime Chat with Mommy Ramblings. I'm Carolyn, and if you're new to our channel, I would like to welcome you and encourage you to click on the subscribe and the notifications bell. We're more than just a true crime channel because I feel you need to have a healthy balance in your life, and let's face it, true crime can be pretty dark. So we mix it up on here with the greatest community on YouTube. We do live craft panels, we share shopping hauls, we showcase DIY tutorials, there's travel destination videos, cute puppy and dog videos, and so much more. Oh, and let's not forget relaxing ASMR videos so that you can relax and sleep after a hard day. You can find everything easily with our playlist. Now, let's look deeper into the Lori Daybell case. There's some really strange stuff surfacing in some court documents, shocking new details. Zombies, dark beings. What does Lori believe? Let's get into it and see. Okay, here we have Brandon and Melanie Boudreaux in happier times. Melanie is Lori Vallow Daybell's niece and is involved in the same cult beliefs as Lori. Brandon and Melanie divorced, and Brandon was nearly killed when he was shot by a person who he believes was Lori's brother Alex Cox. Divorced, and with Brandon getting full temporary custody of their children, Melanie quickly marries Ian Pawlowski. Brandon filed some court papers for the child custody battle, and in those court papers he has statements from Ian about Melanie's beliefs that are quite shocking. So we're going to look at those, and then we're going to actually go through the entire statements as he wrote them in the court document. So let's get into that. In the court documents, Brandon responds to Melanie's allegations with multiple exhibits, including receipts, housing contracts, copies of airplane tickets to Idaho, and other items. But the most alarming details come from what Ian allegedly told his attorneys after meeting with law enforcement officers last fall. Now, the court documents don't show how Brandon obtained that document, but 3 sources told East Idaho News that they came from Pawlowski's own computer. So in that filing, Ian explains religious beliefs that Melanie allegedly shared with him early on in their relationship, back in the fall of 2019. And one subject was zombies. Yes, zombies, meaning human bodies that have had their original spirits forced from them and have been possessed by either a demon or a disembodied spirit or a worm or a slug. Yes. After Melanie told Ian about these and other beliefs, he reportedly wrote that he tried to keep an open mind. Yeah, Ian's trying to keep an open mind about that. Instead of it, run, Ian, run. Okay, sorry, I'm sorry. The idea seemed harmless at first, and she sounded pretty certain of some of them. She talked about how she learned of some of these things in the temple and others from Chad. Oh, just in case you've forgotten, Chad's Lori's new husband. You know, they got married. He's her 5th husband, married 2 weeks after his wife died. Ian said when he first met Chad and Lori, he didn't get a bad impression, but they seemed different. He describes learning of these new religious beliefs as fun and exciting ideas. Yeah, they're fun and exciting, all right. But many of them felt like they were being ripped straight out of a Dungeons and Dragons manual. Okay, Ian. Spirits can be pushed from their bodies during traumatic events or deadly injury. Spirits pushed out are trapped in limbo, and the body they're tied to is still living, but cannot be occupied by them anymore, is what Ian allegedly wrote. The document describes the dark church, with Cain being the first dark being to be translated. Cain walks the earth with 50 dark translated beings to prevent or delay the Lord's second coming, Ian allegedly wrote, mentioning that 2 police investigators assigned to the Lori Daybell case are dark beings. Ian admits he and Melanie married faster than any sane couple would. That's because they weren't a sane couple, but okay. But they both felt it was right. On their wedding night, Melanie began to express concerns about her children. And she explained to Ian that she had fears about what Chad and Lori had stated concerning the original spirits being caught in limbo until the body's death. She stated that Brandon had been possessed by a demon or other dark entity sometime after June of that year. She was told either through revelation or by Chad that something needed to happen to Brandon in order for his spirit to progress and for the Lord's plan to continue. She didn't take well to the idea of her husband dying as part of the Lord's plan, but didn't think action would be taken by anyone. Ian allegedly states that things became concerning when Melanie shared an idea that Chad and Lori could have directed Alex Cox, to take a shot at Brandon, but it wasn't anything she was sure about. And in those court filings, Ian allegedly writes that he and Melanie had been discussing JJ and Tylee. At this point, only JJ was considered missing, and Ian writes that Melanie had been told by Chad and Lori that their children had been possessed and had become zombies. Oh my goodness. Well, she shared concerns that she'd been told told Brandon needed to die, and that may indicate that Tylee and JJ needed to die as well, Ian allegedly wrote. She told me she was worried that Al may have to take care of the kids. She explained that Al had great faith and never wavered in his trust in the Lord, and no task would be too difficult or too great for him. Ian became severely worried about what he thought he was hearing, and he spent days trying to reassure himself that everything was fine. According to court documents, in the meantime, Ian's ex-wife had reached out to Brandon, and he told her Melanie was in a cult, and that she had tried to have him killed. That must have been good to hear, right? Ian's ex-wife contacted him and expressed her concerns, according to these court documents. She said that she was going to meet with police, and Ian agreed to go with her. What I shared with the police were the ideas that Chad, Lori, and Alex may have planned shooting at Brandon, and that Tylee and JJ may be in serious danger. If Melanie's fears have any validity, Ian allegedly wrote. If shooting at Brandon was indeed based on the idea that he was no longer actually Brandon and needed to die as part of the Lord's plan, then the kids' lives could have been forfeited based on the idea that they were not really Tylee and JJ anymore. Ian shared other details. and said he would cooperate with police and allowed them to pull data from his phone. He met with officers the next day, and they gave him a recording device to put on his keychain. My plan was to record anything I thought could help locate Tylee and JJ, locate Chad and Lori, and understand what happened when Brandon was shot at. Ian wrote, "If I thought Chad and Lori were going to be calling, I'd turn on the recorder and I'd just let it run until they hung up." Ian says nothing substantial was ever recorded with Chad and Lori because they never talked about the missing children. On December 19th, police searched Alex Cox' Rexburg, Idaho townhouse, and Ian says he admitted to Melanie that he had spoken with officers. "I didn't know how she was going to react, but I couldn't hang on to that stress anymore. Of course she was hurt, felt betrayed, but she reassured me that she loves me and that she understands why I did it," Ian allegedly wrote. Over the next week, the couple discussed what Ian had shared with officers, and Melanie allegedly told him she didn't have any proof of what she had told him. And they agreed her expressions were just, those what-if scenarios. She was just what-ifing it, right? "I'm worried that I jumped the gun, and I've sent the authorities on yet another wild goose chase, along with prompting them to light up the national media with pieces of what I shared," Ian allegedly wrote. That sounds a little bit fishy. Anyone else? He expressed his frustrations with Chad and Lori fleeing to Hawaii and said he still had his doubts about them. "I don't ever want to have anything to do with those two after this. Melanie has been put through the ringer because of their paranoia and now is in the hot seat because I went to the police and tried to help," Ian allegedly wrote. He concludes his report by saying he will only deal with law enforcement officers going forward if his attorney is present. Ian saying that, that Melanie's in the hot seat because he went to the police just reminds me of, someone getting in trouble because of something they did and then blaming it, so it's very evident to me that Melanie is making him feel guilty for putting her in the hot seat. She's holding something over Ian and saying, if you hadn't gone to the police and these were just my what-if scenarios and I was just talking to you and you jumped the gun and you went to the police and look what you've done to me now, I don't know. Very strange stuff there, right? Now, Garrett Smith, who is the attorney for Ian and Melanie, told East Idaho News that Melanie does not believe the religious beliefs she told her husband about. Rather, she was just informing him of the ideas. She was just blowing some ideas past him, running them. Here you go. What do you think about this? Smith says he's working to discover the truth of this new filing, with the same degree of skepticism we've had with everything else Brandon has filed in this case. Melanie has no knowledge of who shot at Brandon. Come on, don't be silly, folks. She has no information of who did it and does not profess to. Smith said she absolutely does not know where JJ and Tylee are. She's done 3 interviews with the FBI, and she would be in deep waters if she lied to them about that. Whew. She is like everybody else. She would love to know where those kids are, and she hopes they are safe. Smith says Melanie has not spoken with Lori since she was arrested and has cooperated with law enforcement. She and Ian are working to get custody of her 4 children. Melanie is a good, kind, decent woman who has devoted her entire life to her kids. It's an irony to me that while everyone else is scurrying the countryside for JJ and Tylee, Mel, by a pack of lies, is being denied access to her children, Smith says. A hearing is scheduled on the custody issue next week in Mesa. Boudreau declined to comment further on the filing. Now I'm going to delve into the actual court document, that was filed by Brandon Boudreau in response to a motion by Melanie Boudreau regarding their child custody dispute. And in it, Brandon alleges the document was written by Melanie's new husband, Ian Pawlowski. So this is some of the beliefs that are listed in the document, okay? A minimum of 9 mortal lives to become exalted, but more to become gods. After 2 mortal lives, you can choose to sign a light contract or a dark contract. Choosing light or dark isn't permanent. You can choose not to be reborn if you are satisfied with your progress. Veil grows thinner each time you are reborn. Multiple sealings are possible, but males can choose one true spouse or have many. Translation. Translated beings cannot die. They cannot reproduce. They do not need sleep or food. They do not feel the sorrow of the world. Injury is possible, but healing is accelerated and it is never fatal. Done in multiple phases or tests, it usually lasts 3 days. Upon completing the last phase, the Lord appears to the translated. Physical. Can be any physical ailment from sexual desire to disease to severe fatigue. Emotional. Any emotional ailment. Spiritual. A great test of faith. A time of darkness and doubt. And then it says sexual. Possible new phase discovered as husband and wife become more united sexually, possibly increasing power or vibration. There are 50 dark translated humans identified as such. So they identified 2 detectives, Hope and Hermosillo, as these dark translated humans. Okay, so, and this goes through, but I just want to get to zombies, okay? So it goes through, and Cain, and then stats. Vibration is the indication of one's spiritual strength. Above a certain level, that garments are no longer necessary. Higher vibrations can help to thin the veil a little. Libido, and then there's a trust level, and then the light and dark percentage, which is an indication of how much light and darkness dwell in one's body. And then we go to zombies. Okay, human bodies that have had their original spirits forced from them. They have been possessed by either a demon, original third, or the heavenly host who follow Lucifer. Disembodied spirit, once living human spirits who have chosen not to be reborn into another probation or a worm slug, a creature controlled by Lucifer that enters the body to control the host. And spirits can be pushed from their bodies during traumatic events or deadly injury. Spirits pushed out are trapped in limbo, as the body they're tied to is still living, but cannot be occupied by them anymore. And that's why they're saying Brandon was this being. So it really wasn't him anymore, and he needed to be taken out, according to this. Spirits trapped in limbo cannot progress to a new mortal life and cannot re-enter their existing body, and the only way to move forward is to await the death of the current possessed body. This is an illegal action against heavenly law performed by a possessor. Then there's teleportation next. When translated beings are needed, they may, with the Lord's permission, teleport to the necessary location to perform their assigned duties. I wonder why Lori can't teleport herself out of the jail. Dark and light portals. Physical objects all around us that have ties to the spiritual world and can open portals or gateways of both light and darkness through which light and darkness enters and may pass. Now, the Church of the Firstborn and the 144,000. The Church of the Firstborn is a higher organization and God's church in its truest form on earth. The mysteries of God are revealed to those who have become part of it. terrestrial beings and locations begin to be revealed to members. Doctrines add to, but do not replace those of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Prophet of the Mormon Church presides over the general congregation, while others are called specifically to run the Church of the Firstborn. Multiple branches throughout the world. The 144,000 are called to bring to pass all signs of the second coming of Christ. Multiple groups specializing in different powers and activities. Then there's the Patriarchal Order of the Holy Melchizedek priesthood. I know I butchered that, I'm sorry. A higher priesthood bestowed by Chad. This was a higher priesthood bestowed by Chad, by Peter, James, and John. Priesthood keys and authority bestowed on a woman. Women may perform all the same blessings and ordinances as men. The dark church and priesthood. Satan is God's exact opposite. Lucifer has a body, was once an apostle, and fell. Cain was the first dark being to be translated in this creation and walks the earth with 50 dark translated beings to prevent or delay the Lord's second coming. Spiritual gifts or powers. People can manipulate the elements to do the Lord's will and bring to pass signs of his second coming. If you can imagine, it's real. If you can imagine it, it's real. Every fantastic idea is a reality somewhere. Magic, wizards, sorcerers, witches, etc. Spells and curses in Harry Potter are real and require great focused will to use. Supernatural creatures, dragons, giants, fairies, etc. Spiritual weapons, dark and light weapons, weapons that cannot be perceived by celestial beings and injure and scar the spirit. Time to people and things, both light and dark, that influence us. Spiritual healing says healing, malachite, solution, balm. Malachite is said to have healing powers administered by calling on it in a blessing. Okay, and now we're going to have a little bit of a, testimony in here about what's going on. And so this is going to be a little bit easier to understand than what we just went through. It's going to be about Melanie and everything. It says, when Melanie began sharing all of these things with me, I tried to keep an open mind. I'd only met her 4 days previous, but felt very comfortable around her. I believe there is more to the gospel than what I have seen so far, but I never thought it would sound like this. The idea seemed harmless at first, and she sounded pretty certain of some of them. She talked about how she learned of some of these things in the temple and others from Chad and Lori. Upon first meeting Chad and Lori, I didn't get a bad impression of them, but they did seem different. I didn't think anything of that, as I feel that's a fairly normal feeling to experience. I didn't give them much thought, as they said they were planning on taking off and that I'd be taking the reins concerning care of Melanie. They said they'd be going to Hawaii and invited me to come visit sometime. Later, Melanie explained porting and that they could travel there by that method. The first time hearing all of these new beliefs, it was a jolt. I was looking for someone spiritual, but this was a leap beyond that into concerning territory. I had fears and doubts, but I trusted Melanie and wanted to give it a fair chance, so I continued to listen and ask questions in hopes it would click for me. It never did. They were fun and exciting ideas, but it felt like many of them were ripped straight from out of the Dungeons and Dragons manual. Between the stats, accounts of dark and light weapons and words spoken in blessings, it sounded like someone had created a tabletop RPG based on the Bible. While living something like that appealed to me, I couldn't find anything to confirm it as I prayed and asked. I figured anyone called to something like this would struggle, but how else would they be made aware of things like this? I continue to try to keep an open mind and proceed with caution. Melanie began to share that she feared for the lives of the two children based on a dream she had where they came to her. They brought her tidings of great joy. Her daughter thanked her for allowing her the freedom to use her agency until the end, and this concerned me and made my heart ache for her. I felt that there was no way anything could have happened without people finding out. We married faster than any sane couple would, but we felt it was right, and on our wedding night she began to elaborate on the ideas that she shared earlier about her children coming to her. She explained zombies and her fears about what Chad and Lori stated concerning the original spirits being caught in limbo until the body's death, and she stated that Brandon had been possessed by a demon by another dark entity sometime after June of this year. She was told, either through revelation or by Chad, that something would have to happen to him, that something needed to happen to him in order for his spirit to progress and for the Lord's plan to continue. She didn't take well to the idea of her husband dying as part of the Lord's plan, but didn't think the action would be taken by anyone. She still loves Brandon and would never wish any ill on him. It just sounded to her like it would be something that happened on its own when it was his time. This is where things started becoming concerning to me. She shared the idea that Chad and Lori could have directed Al to take a shot at Brandon. It wasn't anything she was sure about. The concern began when she was called into Gilbert PD and asked about Chad, Lori, and Alex after the attempt on Brandon's life. She later was given the impression that the bullet needed to move 5 inches so as not to hit Brandon. Initially, to me, it sounded like this was told to her by Chad. The discussion moved to Chad and Lori's missing children. At the time, only JJ was counted as missing, and the Rexburg PD had conducted raids on Melanie's apartment along with Al's. Melanie had been told by Chad and Lori that their children had been possessed and had become zombies. She shared concerns that she had been told Brandon needed to die, and that may indicate that Tylee and JJ needed to die as well. She told me that she was worried that Al may have to take care of the kids, and she explained that Al had great faith and never wavered in his trust of the Lord. No task would be too difficult or great for him. And when I asked for clarification, she restated her concern verbatim. At that point, I became severely worried, but told myself there was no way I had just married into a situation so sinister. I spent the next 2 days trying to justify my actions and reassure myself that everything was fine, but I couldn't get to that point. My ex-wife, Natalie, had been asking for Melanie's name so she could check her out on social media and get an idea of who she is. Melanie had been adamant that I not share her full name with anyone for fear that Brandon may locate and harass her. I couldn't justify that and eventually gave Natalie Melanie's full name. On Tuesday, December 2nd, I got a call from my mother. She'd just gotten off the phone with Natalie. When we divorced, Natalie made a point to cut herself off from my family and from my entire family and hadn't spoken to any of them for at least 8 months. She had made as little contact with me as possible, but hadn't been unkind since the initial conflict of the divorce. My mother told me she just received a video from Natalie, and Natalie was terrified. She managed to reach Brandon through his business and heard his side of things. She'd been told that Melanie was in a cult and that she had tried to have him killed. Well, I didn't and still don't believe she had anything to do with his attempted murder. I was still terrified at the possibility. The next morning, on the way to work, Natalie called, and we were discussing how to handle this in order to keep our kids safe. And she told me she'd be going in to meet with the police, and I told her I'd go along and lay out everything. I understand. I saw 2 possibilities. The first was that Melanie wasn't the person I thought she was. You think so? He seems like he's getting it. Huh. And I wanted to keep myself and my family out of a dangerous situation. The second was that Melanie had been taken advantage of, and I'm going to get her out of a messy situation and healed. When meeting with the police, I intended to share things as I understood. Detectives Hope and Hermosillo were present, along with an FBI agent named Ricky. I've since shared all of my concerns with Melanie and have gotten clarification on some of them. What I shared with the police were the ideas that Chad and Lori and Alex may have planned the shooting at Brandon, and that Tylee and JJ may be in serious danger, if Melanie's fears had any validity. If shooting at Brandon was indeed based on the idea that he was no longer actually Brandon and needed to die as part of the Lord's plan, then the kids' lives could be forfeited based on that idea that they are not really Tylee and JJ anymore. I stated that Melanie had concerns about them participating in shooting and was against anyone trying to hurt him. She couldn't see them doing these things, but she also knew that they would follow the Lord's will as they saw it. I shared ideas about earthquakes being prepared in SLC, and that it was believed there would be a time when the quakes hit that many possessions would occur, and that due to the high number of injured, such a thing would be a huge threat to God's plan and would need to be dealt with directly. Al and Zulema had stayed in Las Vegas and were preparing earthquakes at the time I spoke with the police. I shared concerns for the safety of my kids and Natalie. I offered to help in any way I can. I then allowed them to pull data from my phone. I met with them again the following afternoon and restated what I knew for a few other detectives, Lieutenant Ball and another FBI agent named Travis, and they shared some mild concerns with me about potentially spying about me potentially spying for Chad and Lori, and I explained that I was there because I was very concerned primarily for the safety of my kids and that I wanted to get Melanie out of this if possible. They gave me a recording device that looked like a thumb drive on a keychain. My plan was to record anything that I thought could help locate Tylee and JJ, Chad and Lori, and understand what happened when Brandon was shot at. If I thought Chad and Lori were going to be calling, I'd turn on the recorder and just let it run until they hung up. I don't feel that anything substantial was recorded, as Chad and Lori never talked about the kids or their location. Most of the conversations consisted of everyone commiserating about the current circumstances, discussing religious ideas, and just catching up. In addition to the recordings, I would talk with Ricky, and he'd let me know things that may come up in conversation. He was never specific, but would give me enough information for me to know when it came up. These tips turned into Tammy's body being exhumed and Al's passing. On 12/19, Detective Hermosillo contacted me and told me that they had another warrant for Al's apartment next door. He asked if I'd give them the code to the garage so they wouldn't have to break the door in, and I shared the code. I didn't see any reason not to. They went in with forensics team and looked at all evidence looked for any evidence of JJ having been there. And Melanie saw them there and spent the afternoon at my apartment. That night, I went to the apartment and looked around to see what they had been doing or if they had taken anything. I also wanted to see the warrants to understand what they had been looking for. After looking around, I went to see Melanie at my apartment. I finally broke down and I told her that I'd spoken with the police and that I don't believe any of this. I didn't know how she would react, but I couldn't hang on to the stress anymore. Of course she was hurt, feeling betrayed, but she reassured me that she loves me and that she understands why I did it. At the time, I didn't share that I'd been recording anything. I wasn't sure if we'd hear from Chad and Lori again. Over the following week, we had discussions on our situations, and I came to understand things a little better. She was legitimately afraid of the ideas I'd shared with the police and the FBI. But there wasn't anything she had any proof of. As I'd spoken with her and dug into the details, I've come to believe that she truly doesn't know anything about who shot at Brandon or where the kids have gone. She only has what-if scenarios that she shared. I'm worried that I jumped the gun and have sent the authorities on yet another wild goose chase, along with prompting them to light up the national media with pieces of what I've shared. My intent was to protect my family and help solve this case of the kids' disappearance, not smear anyone in the public eye. I certainly don't want to give Brandon any ammo to hurt Melanie any more than he already has. I still have my doubts. Primarily, why not turn to the police first instead of disappearing if you claim your life is in danger? Why leave your innocent niece here to clean up this mess and encourage her not to cooperate with the authorities? Why encourage her not to fight for her kids? Her ex-husband now has temporary sole custody as a result. Why not simply provide proof that the kids are okay and put an end to this insanity? Isn't it odd that the two detectives assigned to your case happen to be two of the Kane's Dark 50? Everyone trying to do their job and save these kids are either evil or deceived. Your kids are missing, and it doesn't come up once during a handful of lengthy conversations. There are so many more that I have. I don't ever want to have anything to do with those two after this. Melanie has been put through the ringer because of their paranoia, and now she's in the hot seat because I went to the police and tried to help. I know she's done nothing wrong, and I want her free from this. I will no longer openly cooperate with the police or the FBI, but I will through a lawyer. My final straw was when I received a call on Friday from Ricky, where he threatened charges of lying to a federal officer and or being an accessory in the disappearance of Tylee and JJ because Melanie couldn't clearly answer questions about the religious aspects of the investigation. After I shared my doubts with her, her world shattered. She couldn't answer those questions because she doesn't know what she believes about those things anymore. There was so much information dumped on her by Chad and Lori that she can't even remember what she learned from them. From the podcast she listened to on her own, a 20-year-old FBI agent throwing a hissy fit after one shaky interview tells me all I needed to know about how they want to handle this. She didn't trust authorities before because of how poorly the AF treated her when she went to pick up her kids with a court order in hand. Okay, so, that's a mouthful, right? With Melanie. Now it's, poor Melanie. She's just been given the shaft from Chad and Lori, and now, those were just what-if scenarios. She really doesn't know anything about that, and her new husband jumped the gun going to the police, and now it's all, it's just such a mess, and, we can agree on one thing, it is a mess, and what about this case? This is just really, really crazy. We get a glimpse at what Chad and Lori believe. We get a glimpse at what Melanie believed or still believes. We get a glimpse of what the heck is going on in these homes. And wow, it's really scary. And hearing that, and if they truly believe that, how they went to take Brandon's life, if that's true what Melanie said, that they believe that Tylee and JJ also were not themselves, then maybe when they're saying the kids are all right, they believe the kids are all right, but they're just not alive anymore because their human bodies had to be destroyed in order for them to progress, right? That's kind of what I'm thinking here. I mean, it's horrible to think of, but it's been so long. There's no, nothing known about them. Some people think they might be hidden somewhere in a cult somewhere. You know, we can hope for that. At least they'd be alive. But my goodness, we've got to find these kids and what happened to them now. It's too long, and it's just absolutely crazy, right? Oh my gosh. Okay, well, that's what we have for you today. And again, we are going to keep deep diving into this case. You can look at the other videos in the playlist. And thank you for watching. Again, if you're new, please hit the subscribe. And if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. I'd appreciate that. Take care, guys. I'll see you later. Bye-bye. We'll be live at night, and we usually discuss the cases. So if you have questions about this, you can bring them to the next live. Take care. Bye-bye.